Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Alpine Odyssey. We are working on a flat ride today in the Aztec area, and you can see I'm trying out some of the smaller shapes, seeing what we can do along this, I guess, plaza that is naturally forming around the Insanity ride that we have placed along the shore. So what I want to do is try and make something a little bit more sculptural over something more architectural. And the reason for this is that the Mayan kind of Aztec cultures did a lot of these relief sculptures into pretty much all their buildings, their temples along certain pathways and pillars, and they're very vibrant and just overall highly detailed and just covered with art. So to try and bring a little bit of that into the park itself, we are going to be decorating the queue line for the Insanity here for pretty much the whole episode. And this is kind of a long process. Whenever you're doing something like this in Planet Coaster, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of trial and error. There are some copy and paste tricks you can do to try and save time in the long run. But overall, it's kind of you're placing something down, seeing if it looks right, zooming out, trying to see if compositionally makes sense, and then you zoom back in. That's also a thing you do a lot in like general art, painting, drawing. It's a lot of kind of zooming out, taking in the whole picture and zooming back in. So what we're doing is making the head of a serpent. And the Mayans drew a lot of serpents and snakes, and so I figured this one would make a whole bunch of sense to do. And plus, since the queue line is kind of this zigzag kind of winding back and forth pattern, I think it was going to work out quite nicely. So what we're doing is using a thicker, kind of raised up slightly block to make an outline of some shape around the head of this animal. And then we are inlaying the interior details at a slightly lower level so that I don't have to worry about Z-fighting too much. And we're going to be coloring this thing a lot of greens, a lot of reds, and some gold, just to make it match the rest of this kind of jade area that we have started so far. There might be other areas like a ruby area or another type of gemstone themed section, which I think could be pretty cool. Making some teeth using some of these pillar toppers, which is kind of cool to do. I didn't think how well it would work, but overall pretty happy. Now this thing does end up kind of looking less and less like a serpent. Sometimes, it might look more like a dragon, or in its current phase, it might look a little bit more like just a lizard or Godzilla. But over time, it will gain colors and some more defining features as we go through here. So we're doing this kind of darkish green outline. We are using kind of a tan color for its underbelly. And then to get scales, we're just doing a tiled plaza effect using light and green tiles, and then that's going to basically break up its base surface. And we'll just copy and paste this around as quickly as possible. It's a long kind of process, and sometimes I had to cut out a decent amount of footage just so I could have enough to talk about. There's really not much crazy kind of techniques to go along here. I'm using the tips of the kind of brick siding there just to get this very thin line, and I'm adding this detail kind of right at the edge of the scales and its hide, and it's pretty interesting. It's creating a little bit of break there. The Mayans also did a lot of kind of unique tongue shapes in their drawings of these serpents. It almost looks like they're kind of breathing fire in a sense, but it is kind of representing the tongue. So using the wood block there, giving it kind of this flowy, kind of rounded bits in the middle, and then we can decorate and color that a little bit later. And it's just kind of goes with the whole theme in general. And I hope to do a lot more of these sculptures in this area. I think unlike the European section where they're more defined by like the wood trim and those small details, this area is going to be more defined by the color palette and the sculptures going along walls or other surfaces. Another thing with building on pathways, sadly, pathway construction is a little bit slower than normal, kind of just floating off in space, simply because it's hard to select things when there's a path. The path, for some reason, it really interferes with object selection in the game. So, you know, you can't really just left click and there you have it. You know, you have to do a lot of kind of box selections and then hope you're accurate enough to only grab the section you need. And a lot of this I'm not doing copy and paste because there's really, I don't know what I want it to look like yet. You know, I have a few reference images of some of their sculptures, but you know, I'm not making a direct copy by any means. And so it's really hard to see how these pieces are going to fit together in the long run. Normally in our buildings, you know, I can make a tile set and then copying that around really quickly and then throw in some unique details. When you're doing sculptures, it's a lot more of a strict art process, and so there's a lot of trial and error. You know, even adding this red trim right above the tan underbelly color that we chose, just so it breaks again from the green. And we'll even add the red trim above it. And you know, these are things you just have to kind of test and figure out. The red trim can also be added on the other side of the green line, and so you're basically dividing the zones into different sections and hoping for the best. Also, since a lot of these parts are very long and we're just using the tip of them, you know, copy and paste is not really our best friend at times. You have to kind of go underneath the surface to kind of grab a lot of these bits and pieces, but you know, you can kind of manage if you do things you know, to the best of your ability. And it just takes some patience to do stuff like this. At this point, we're going to make a little bit of a repetitive tile that we can use for the back kind of spine of the creature. It's going to be, you know, base green surrounded by red, and actually going to have a little bit of a light blue tint in the middle there, and then some gold specks going along in an evenly, or somewhat evenly spaced fashion, just for some extra detail. And you know, all this stuff would have been painted in its heyday, so that's why everything's a little bit vibrant. You know, we can have areas a little bit more dilapidated and run down, but I think in this section I'm fine with things being a little bit more pristine. You know, breaking from the European section and having that be run down, I think helps blend the two areas together. But this one being pristine, because you're a little bit closer to the ziggurat, I think makes a little bit more sense. And maybe on the other side of the ziggurat, we can start breaking things down again as we transition into the antiquity section. That way, there's a little bit of a divider in between the two areas, and hopefully they don't look too similar. There's going to be a lot of ancient civilizations, if you think about it, in our park. We do plan for, of course, the antiquity section after this one, but also after the antiquity section, I want a kind of a water park that's going to be themed after Atlantis. So that's going to be even more of kind of the same theme set, but somewhat of a tropical theme as well. So hopefully that pans out. With the rest of this path laid out, I didn't want to have the whole thing just be completely flat on the pathway. You can see it when you're riding the ride because you can look down at it. However, just to make sure it kind of reads a little bit better from a distance, we're going to raise up the back half of the Serpent off the ground. And here we can use a bit of copy and paste to our advantage, trying to get some of the shape copied over. And you know, you have to forgive the boxiness. Baki, it sounds like Pocky. I'm not in Japan. I'm not Silverette right now. The boxiness, just because the pieces we're using. We're not using very, you know, small pieces. These are kind of long, but we'll end up probably over time covering up a lot of this area. Like we could put a plaza technically above this section and have a railing there, and then you wouldn't notice how thick these pieces are. In fact, they would merge rather seamlessly into the upper section where that restaurant is, and you could have a restaurant sitting area, I think, and hopefully that looks good in the long run. But for now, it's just this ride space, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing when you build a full park or something very large in the game in general. Everything kind of comes in little sections, and then over time you fill in more and more area, and then you just kind of create something pretty cool. Here, making this kind of bend wrap around, which is kind of hard to think about, but we managed that easy enough. You know, you just have to kind of try and make the seams line up with the blocks, and then it doesn't matter if it rotates or anything like that. There you can see the kind of the underbelly of the serpent doing that whole wrapping type function there. And then we'll add a little bit of a tail to this. A lot of the tails that it did for serpents, for some reason, didn't just come to a point. They almost look like proper, I guess you could say, long-haired animal tails for some reason. Multiple kind of bits coming off of it in a decorative kind of pattern. So that's what we're doing here. It's a little boxy, but again, hopefully as we progress through the areas, things will get more and more filled in and cover up some of this and interact with it in different ways. It's just for now, you know, you make something pristine just so that you know it works and looks right, and then you're free to blend it into another area just fine. We even add some blue on here. This kind of is the joint of the tail, so that's why it looks a little bit different. We'll also go ahead and carry on with the serpent motif a little bit down the sides of the ride. And what I'm doing here is doing this brick pattern and a little bit of a zigzag formation, and that's going to be basically like a serpent on the ground going up and down. We'll add a little bit of decoration on its spine, just so it looks, I guess, a little bit more unique and fancy. And then we'll just copy it all the way down. We can wrap it around the path, basically 100%, all the way to the entrance to the ride. And then, of course, we'll try and use the same thing on the other side, closer to the exit. You know, again, you want to check, make sure everything looks all right, and then you're free to carry on. So other than that, the front part there, we might end up turning to sculptures. I'm not quite sure yet. It's basically up to you guys. I do need your feedback on this and see how things are turning out. If you want me to continue with what I have been talking about this episode into some more details, or if you think I should move on to a new building, what have you. But, you know, I just want to get some feedback so you guys get that opportunity before I call this off. And of course, we'll mess with it a little bit maybe during the live stream and try and tie that down into the train tracks a little bit better down below. The train tracks are going to have to be kind of readjusted, just simply because there was nothing here before, but now there is, and so we have to think of how they interact with the environment in a different way. Here, adding some netting and some fencing kind of coming off the plaza line there in case someone decides to try and jump the railing that's going to be actually hugging this thing. You know, and other than that, it's basically just safety concerns. Kind of, you know, using some gold colors to break it off and make it look even more fancy and vibrant from a distance. We added these kind of banana trees here as planters along the side, and just more netting. And as these details get built up and built up and built up, you know, something that looks kind of flat and boring initially, like the head here, can turn into something I think pretty cool. Like we'll even add some stone and some bits that's actually sticking out and supporting a lot of this tongue. That way it looks like it's kind of carved out of the same rock and then painted over, and it looks like they kind of share, and the whole structure is a little bit more grounded. There's still plenty of rock things that we need to do in the area and foliage, but we'll eventually get there. This is going to be the sign for the ride. I know I haven't done a lot of signs for any of our other flat rides, like our carousel or the Tri-Storm, but this one I wanted a sign. It's going to be, I think, called the Jade Serpent. Now, it's a little bit of an Asian sounding name, and in fact it does look a bit like an Asian style dragon, but it's kind of I don't know. I think it works well enough in the Mayan section to be different and more interesting. I don't quite know how to explain it. It's just me winging it like I do every week, it seems, to make something cool within a few hours so I can get one of these kind of cranked out here. We're gonna add a little bit of covered area. A lot of this queue is uncovered, not really offering a whole bunch of shade. That's kind of why we added the banana trees along the path. That way we don't have to build a structure. You can use trees and things to create shade. And this is the one building, using a lot of vines, ivy, and seaweed to create this little bit of a naturalistic woven kind of roof to it, much like some of the other structures we've done here in the Aztec area. So that's kind of tying all that together. We'll have some palm trees sticking out, kind of the rock outcrop here in the corner, just because I think it looks cool. Kind of balances that corner out a bit and that building out, and make sure that doesn't look like a sore thumb. We'll add some normal straight palm trees here along the shoreline. I was thinking about using trash cans for the actual planters for them, but decided against it. So we're gonna rough together something that I might use as a planter, and then go ahead and recreate it using a building. Really, you can probably just do this as a building on the get-go. I just kind of forgot to do so. At this point, we'll just go ahead and make a little final railing for this lower plaza that we did last episode, and then we'll be basically done. It's a lot of wood, so we're doing a lot of wooden planks along the bottom, and then we're doing this more kind of pole fence to become a large planter. We'll fill this with a whole bunch of smaller plants, flowers and things, anything that we can fit in here in generally. There's a lot of narrow space to fill, and it can be a little hard in Planet Coaster to find small enough plants a lot of the time. And so you can see we're just kind of throwing everything in there, and any clippings on the other side can be covered up with overhang. So let's go ahead into real time and see what you guys think. Hello and welcome to the real-time section of today's video, where we get to take a look at the Jade Serpent ride skin that we made for the Insanity thrill ride. That is also the flat ride for the Aztec area. I don't know why I'm mincing words, but here we are. So from above, you can see the Serpent winding through the queue line and then becoming a more vertical wall, kind of retaining wall for one of the upper areas that will eventually form as we progress through the Aztec theme. We have a signpost for the Jade Serpent. Haven't made the sign text yet. We might do that during this week's live stream, because I think text work is pretty fun to do live, and I can get feedback on design kind of instantly rather than kind of waiting for this video to come out and then going through all the comments. We have this cool kind of low fence going all the way around to the entrance. And having this texture on the path down here is pretty cool as well. Though there is a bunch of Z fighting that you get with it just because of how close these blocks had to be together. But, from up here, you don't notice it. The Z fighting basically stops, and I'm okay with it. We got the dragon, not dragon. It looks like a dragon. It looks kind of like an Asian dragon, but it's definitely a Mayan serpent. We have the snake head over here, and this is its tongue. A lot of the times that they drew the tongue, it kind of looked like flame coming out, just because they added kind of these rounder bits where everything else was a little bit more square. So that's kind of an interesting style that they had with these things. We're adding some rocks and supporting features. I still need to fill in some of these little gaps. We have some netting going up along the side here. So, if anyone wants to jump the railing onto the train tracks for some reason, this would prevent them from doing so. We have plenty of rock, foliage, dead space area that I need to fill apparently. We got some palm trees here, which is going up, and it's kind of covering the left side of it. That way it's framing the Insanity ride itself there. And a small wooden shack structure with kind of leaves and the woven effect that we've been doing in a lot of the other buildings. Over here, along the water's edge, we have the large wooden planter that we decided to construct. It's basically just some fence posts kind of lined up together to make it look like one large continuous structure, and I think that looks pretty good. Hopefully in the next, couple live streams or so, we might get started working on these train tracks, get these integrated a little bit more into the theme set. We'll have to rework this area here because you can see it's kind of clipping, and that's kind of the thing you run into when you pre-lay out your track, and then when you get into actually filling in the detail, you kind of realize that you use more room than you originally planned. But that's basically normal at this point. The vertical part of the wall on the episode, I did say that, eventually this could change and become more supporting for like a larger plaza section. Up here, I want a large restaurant. So, this could be seating eventually. We just had to put a floor over it. and some more decorative bits to tie it all in, but I'm perfectly fine with doing something like that. It'll also give you a good view of the waterway, the temple, the ride here, which is called, what is this called? This is the Overpower 3, which is our other flat ride. Still not set on that being the final destination, because the main ziggurat is going here, and I don't know if I want this thing to block the view of it at all. So I might end up moving this to the right side here. It might pinch the backstage area that we have planned, but we'll see. I do want to go over a little bit of what we did on the live stream this weekend, just for those who did not get to see it. We made this kind of water, kind of flowing plaza way, and this is using the River Rapids ride for the water effect going across this tiled plaza, very similar to what you would see in bath tiles here in modern day. We made this kind of decorative tower with a large flame in the center of it, and it's just overly detailed to no end, really, for its size. It's quite a lot of pieces. It's like 500 pieces there. Ooh, the insanity is running. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things is it kind of fits this area. It's kind of the capstone. It's also the dead end of the first floor. You kind of have to go through this gift shop that I have planned for, I think, the next episode of Planet Coaster. Other than that, I think I'll show you guys the ice cream truck. We did finish our vehicle pack on the last live stream. So this is the full vehicle pack for Alpine Odyssey. It is on the Steam Workshop. You guys can download it now. And the last vehicle that we made is a little bit of an ice cream truck. It has an ATM inside of it just so it becomes operational, so people actually stop at it. And here is basically what it looks like actually in the park itself. So, you know, it could be troublesome to place, but totally worth it in my mind. Anyways, I think that's it for this episode of Planet Coaster. We'll just go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a zoomed out look at the park. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoy the content, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more creative goodness. Go ahead and leave some feedback down below. This park is as much yours as it is mine. And leave a like, dislike, you guys know what to do. And I'll see you in the next video.